Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voice Like a Lion podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pemberton, and today we have someone who, honestly, when I made the reach out to him, I didn't think he would be here because he is such a fascinating character. I'm so excited to get to know more about his story, and I know it's going to directly impact so many of you guys listening because everyone who listens to this podcast, you are a business owner at some stage of your journey. So today I have Mike Volkin. Mike is a 6-time author, public speaker, fractional CMO, investor, and this is the craziest part of all of it, is he has exited 6 different companies. His company, Volkinator Enterprises, has worked with 36 industries, and that is a whole lot, and over 20 countries through coaching and by being a fractional CMO. Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. That was a really great intro.
Made me Thank you. I do my best. Hey, I try. I try every now and then. But yeah, I appreciate you being here. There's so many different ways that this episode could go, but honestly, how did you get started in business? Like, everyone can hear these things. 36 industries is a bunch. 6 companies exited. Most of us, including me, would love to exit just one, and we can get to all that, but I would love to know what even got you interested in the business stuff.
I mean, honestly, I don't want to talk bad about my father, but my father worked his butt off his entire life, and I'm going through high school. You know, he drives an hour to school to work every day and an hour back. He's burnt out all the time. On the weekends, it's just chores. I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to live a life like that. Not this. I mean, he's a successful guy and all, but I wanted life on my terms. So when I was in college, I had an idea for a business and I just gave it a go. And although, it did have customers, but ultimately it failed, but it was just like exhilarating. So like, you know what, I think I'm on this entrepreneur rush, and ever since then I've just been doing my own thing, whatever, an idea comes in my head and I write it down and I kind of do some research to see if it makes it for a good business model. And if it does, I launch it.
See, that your story reminds me a lot of my own. Both of my parents, they worked the same job. The whole time I've been alive until both of them retired, they worked in the same role for over 30 years. So my dad was 36 and my mom was 33, I believe. And I just remember, because I'd never seen business, like business was not a thing our family ever did. The only thing I'd ever seen was my mom do basically a whole bunch of side hustles my entire life. So my only exposure to business was something where I actually hated it because I just felt like it just pulled my mom away from us. And it wasn't something I was ever interested in because of that. But I just remember when I was 12 years old, I was sitting there playing Need for Speed Most Wanted on my PS2. And I'm driving this Lamborghini and I pull up to this little house on the beach. And for some reason, I thought, you know what? I think this is possible for me. I feel like this is something that could happen. And ever since then, it's just been this crazy journey to now I'm a business owner and I've been decently successful as far as some people would say. So it just depends on how you define success. And so for me, I just think that's such a fascinating thing because one of the things you said was you said that you had this business in high school and it eventually failed. But I can imagine, and I would love to understand a little bit more about this in just a second, but I can imagine that wasn't really a failure. It's just a setup to these other successes that you've had. So what was one of those main lessons that you learned running that business early on that you've been able to implement in some of these other companies you've been able to exit?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was early on in college when I started my first business, and the main important lessons I learned is that starting a business isn't easy. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of gurus saying, "Oh, passive income. Give me a few dollars and I'll show you how to work 2 hours a month and make $20,000 a month." It's ridiculous, and a lot of suckers fall for that, and they think that that's all it takes. But every single business I've ever started is a lot of work. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and to this day, there's no easy way to do it. There's no toggle switch you turn on and you got yourself a money flowing in the door with barely any work. It just doesn't work like that. There are gurus that will sell that to the end of time, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, see, that's what I've run into. 100%. That is something that I feel like if more people understood that, and I would love to dig a little bit deeper into that. But for me, this is something I just told a lady last Monday where she was really interested, her and her husband, in buying a business. They said, well, my husband, he's going to quit his job. We're going to take our nest egg and we're going to go buy a business. It's already running. It's got cash flow and we'll just step in and make money. And I said, well, here's something I would love for you to understand. And I was standing there with one of my buddies. He owns a franchise here locally in Tulsa. And I said, hey, buddy, you can probably comment on this even better than me. I said 2 things. One, if it is cash flowing to the point where it's passive, why are they selling it? And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, those businesses that I understand that are at that level, they're multi-million dollar businesses
Mm-hmm.
where you have to have a good amount of capital if you're going to buy that kind of company. And I said, how much do you have to spend? They said, well, about 100,000. I said, so probably you're going to buy a fixer upper.
Yeah.
And I said, here's two lessons, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. But one of them is I said it's going to take longer than you're going to expect, and it's going to be harder than you're going to expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I wish somebody would have told me 5 years ago when I first got into business, because
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was going to be like this. I thought just the same as you were saying is I saw some of these gurus. I'm 30 years old. And at that time, I was in my early 20s. And I go, oh, they just make it sound so easy. So all I got to
Yeah.
do is just work a little bit and just, make a couple sales and I'll be great at this.
Yeah. I was in that stage too where I wanted to buy a company. I did that many years ago. And buying a company or selling a company is for a lot of reasons. It's like, what can I hide from the buyer? So I went and I found a company that I wanted to buy. It wasn't very expensive at all, but 90% of their sales came from Facebook marketing, and I'm a good Facebook marketer. So I figured, what the heck? Let's go ahead and buy this one. And he didn't really give any reasons why I should buy it. All those numbers are solid and everything. So I bought it, paid him the money, and I soon realized why he sold the company. But he would never disclose that. And it's not like I'm going to sue him for the money I bought. It would take me more just to sue him and to get my money back. But it turns out the product was classified as a medical device on Facebook marketing. I was on Facebook, and I was no longer able to market it. So what was previously accounted for over 90% of the sales is completely debunked, and I had to find a new way to sell it, which I did. It was just I could have done it myself without paying him the money to buy the company. I could have just sourced it from another country, started a website myself. Like, there's no reason for me to buy the company if I knew that, and he knew that. So that's the reason why he wasn't disclosing it. So he made some money on that, and I eventually sold it. I broke even, but nonetheless, it was a lot more work than if I were to just, started the company myself with, my own way that I wanted to market it and develop the marketing materials.
So that's fascinating. So how were you able to do that? Because when I hear that, it's okay. You have one acquisitions channel that's 90% of the total acquisitions, and then it's gone overnight. Because I understand doing Facebook marketing. I've been doing it for the last 4 years. So when you have that classified as a medical device, like, your sales just go away pretty much.
For
So how were you able to turn that around?
Well, there's so many different ways to diversify your marketing, turn products around, turn services around with different approaches. For that particular one, that was an allergy device. It was a wearable allergy device. So instead of going to Facebook marketing and going direct to consumers, I went through influencers, had a couple of good, you hire 10 influencers and 2 of them will pop really well, and you'll get a good, revenue stream that way. So I always made sure to have 3 or 4 influencers a month. And then I reinvested that into more influencer marketing until I broke even, and I got out as soon as I could, because I didn't see too much, with the amount of work I was putting into it, for what I was getting out of it, there were better opportunities out there.
So what do you look for when you think about an opportunity? Because exiting 6 different companies, most of us would love to just come up with one idea that's good enough to get acquired. What do you think of, or how do you position yourself to build a solid foundation to grow a company that can then get acquired?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to give you an answer for everybody out there who's listening who might have started a business or thinking about buying a business. The number one thing I would caution you against when buying or starting a business is don't do anything just because it sounds attractive. Do something because it aligns with something you're interested in, a passion, a hobby, something you've always wanted to try to get into. Don't buy a business, for example, if you hate networking with people or you're not an extrovert. Don't buy a business that requires you to be on stage or going to clubs and pitching your service. If you're an introvert and like to be behind the keyboard, then buy something online, right? So just because an opportunity seems good on paper, if it doesn't align with your passion, all you're doing is you're buying a job that you're not going to like. And the whole reason why you're starting a business is to spend time doing what you like to do, or else you might as well just go get a job and be a slave at a 9 to 5. So just align anything you're doing with your passion.
That's good. That's really good. And I think even for me, this is something I didn't quite realize early on. And even now I'm starting to understand a little bit better, because my business partner and I, he's exited. He actually has done the thing I want to do. He's exited a company a few years ago for a big enough sum that he was able to travel the country and just take a few years off. And he and I are thinking about starting a e-commerce brand. I've had a couple different e-com stores go over $1 million a year. Really enjoyed doing those. So we want to start one together. And what he has been talking to me about, and also just the network that we have, is very similar to what you said. Is because what I found over time is you can build a business that makes you money, but all you're doing is just, if you hate the business that you're building, it's just a high paying job.
Yep.
And so that's why even now I was just thinking about, okay, I enjoy what I do now, and there's things that I enjoy more. So why would I focus on growing something as big as it can be or as big as I want it to be if I don't love it? I would rather
Mhm.
focus my energies, my efforts, all my time, energy into something that makes sense for me and something that I actually enjoy to do.
Yep. Absolutely. And just make sure that when you do like it, it's something you're going to like for a long time. One of the companies I built was in the fitness industry, and I was a big fitness buff, kind of still am, but that was my main hobby back in my 20s and 30s. But what I didn't like is interacting with everybody. Everybody's a hater online with fitness. They tell them to do some kind of exercise, and it's, oh yeah, you just give them the wrong form, or everybody's an expert, right? You want to be careful that you're net marketing it in a way where people don't get to you. You don't get too in the weeds of the comments and stuff, because everyone seems to be an expert out there, and even if you're completely right, people will disagree with you. So you have to distance yourself emotionally from your product or your service, whatever you're selling out there, to make sure that you don't get negative thoughts about running the business just because of the way people are reacting to it. You have to really believe in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. So with
Yeah.
these 6 companies that you've exited, it's because one of the things that I mentioned even in the intros, that 36 different industries, that's a lot of verticals. So have
Yeah.
all 6 of these companies, they've been in all e-commerce, or what have these different companies been in?
Um, Everything. I mean, product, services, SaaS companies, two-sided marketplaces, you name it. Um, Part of what I like to do is, I like fractional CMO work. So I like the diversity. Like today, I woke up, I worked a little bit on my client that's a two-sided marketplace. It's actually a social network called Emerald Chat. It's kind of like the old Omegle that's now debunked.
Yeah.
So, and then for a couple hours later, I worked on an e-commerce client that is many millions of dollars. When he came to me 5 years ago, he was making 30, 50,000 a month, and now he's doing 2 million a month online, at least, if not 4 million. That's Platinum Therapy Lights. They do red light therapy. They have the best panels in the world, and it shows, and customers love us. So I like the diversity of it. I like being able to wake up and work on one company and work on another company, and then even treat myself like my own client. I have my own business I'm going after, and I'm starting a nonprofit. So I treat myself like my client in that respect. I segment a certain portion of my day to work on my own companies as well.
I love that. So with the nonprofit, I know that you're just saying that you're about to get that started. What does that look like?
That is a totally different animal than for-profit companies.
Yep.
My nonprofit, it really had interestingly enough, I programmed ChatGPT, a bot, to act and think like me, like a digital version of myself online. And I started asking it all these deep questions, like, tell me 3 things about myself I don't know, and what is my purpose in life, like just to see how accurate it is. And man, we had a really good conversation, and out of it came a nonprofit. I'm passionate about animals. I'm passionate about wildlife. I used to be a scientist, an environmental scientist.
Well,
Um, and I always wanted to do something with that, but if there's really no money in like conservation, it's really like charity work. It's very difficult to be a fractional CMO and charge my $300 an hour for a conservation company. They're always very thin margins, if any margins. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't I start a nonprofit because I love technology, that basically innovates technology to conservation. I want to start a nonprofit that funds technology products to get out to the field faster, to save animals, to save the wildlife faster than ever. I want to streamline that whole process because there's a lot of cool tech in there, AI, machine learning, all that great stuff that could be used in the field that just isn't because there's funding gaps. So that's what my nonprofit is going to be focusing on, and I'm launching it as we speak. It's called Wild Tech Alliance, and I'm putting all my resources into that right now.
wow. I absolutely love that. I literally, the name of the show is Voice Like a Lion. I actually have a lion behind my
Yeah.
head. So, I mean, for you doing that, I just want to say thank you because I appreciate that. And I mean, especially because I grew up, I used to watch Animal Planet all the time. I used to watch
Mm-hmm.
Steve the Crocodile Hunter. He was absolutely my favorite. And then I just used to watch that all the time. And it's been such a fascinating journey to see the correlations. And it really hurts me to see some of the younger generation now not engage as much with wildlife when it's like, man, they've been around for so long. There's so much you can actually learn about yourself if you just take a journey out
Mhm.
into the woods for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing more soothing than, I mean, even like going on a hike and not being on your phone, just like listening to your feet crunching the leaves or something. Like it's called walking meditation, but I do it a lot, and it just really allows you to reflect and connect with nature. And there's really nothing like it. It's uncomparable. So I like
I
to be
agree.
more involved in it.
Yeah. So with that being said, even with the way that you're approaching that, because I'm sitting here and as we're talking, I'm learning a little bit about your mindset and how you approach things. It sounds like a couple things happen is you are not rigid. There's a lot of people when they do CMO work that they are very rigid. You know, we're just going to do all paid marketing, or they're really good at influencer marketing. But for you, it sounds more like you're more profit focused. You're going to find a way to help them actually make money and not just top line sales, but actually in their bank account.
Yeah, the reason, the way I separate myself from other CMOs, so to speak, is I'm an entrepreneur. So I've built and sold companies myself, and I really think about business valuation because all entrepreneurs someday want to scale their company so they can sell it, to have that Lamborghini and live on the beach like you had mentioned in your video game. So everybody's got their eyes on that eventually, whether it's 3 months down the road or 3 years down the road. Um, and that's the way I position myself. You know, I know about company value. I know how to build value, and I'm more than just a marketer. I'm a leader. I've taken leadership classes. I was trained in the Army as a leader, and I just apply that to businesses. And so I extend myself a little bit more than just marketing. I'm more of a creative entrepreneur as well.
Well, thank you for your
Self.
service. Both of my
Oh,
parents
thanks.
served in the military, so I appreciate that. And
Thank
I
you.
always want to honor when somebody has served our nation.
Oh,
And
thanks.
when you're talking about that, when for me, because I just think about it, I've seen it in different models where you can go from zero to $1 million with one acquisition channel, one persona, if you just do it right, if you have some of the right systems in place. But I've also seen it where you can grow so fast and not really know how you have grown that as soon as hard times hit, you just are basically out of business because then your sales dip. You don't actually have a solid foundation in place. You just kind of got lucky and you're not able to scale it. So what kind of systems do you help? So there's one client in particular you said was doing about $30,000 to $50,000 a month, and now they're in the millions per month. What was one of the main things that you saw that helped them get from 50,000 a month to 100,000 a month? So basically taking them from 6 to 7 figures.
Yeah, really good question. I experienced this myself too. I'd say fortunately, but unfortunately, I grew up a company so fast that it just kind of crumbled amongst itself. This is back when I was an early entrepreneur. I had a new concept for a real estate company, and I franchised it, and I started selling franchises for tens of thousands of dollars, and the franchise started taking off. And I'm like, geez, I went too fast, too hard, and then I wound up selling the company, but I could have sold it for a lot more. And honestly, clients come to me a lot saying I've scaled and now I didn't do it right. The single most important thing, uh, you know what? I'll just show you a little book. I wrote a book on this.
Ooh,
It's called The Business Success Formula. This is an actual mathematical formula on how to scale a business, and it's a weighted factor. And the number one thing that I would tell you when scaling a company properly is to retool your staff. I don't mean like fire
mm,
your existing staff and get a more focused staff, because a lot of times companies grow and they just like take on freelancers here and there for a little work, and you could have the wrong freelancer or employee at the wrong stage of your company. So the way that you grow smart, when you're in the position where you have a lot of revenue and you're falling behind on operations and things are starting to fall apart and you don't know what to try next for your revenue, you need to get a new leadership team or a more focused mid-level, to really propel your company to the next level. Because there really are employees that only focus on certain stages of the companies, whether they realize it or not. There are certain employees that are really good with big companies that have tight processes. They're really good with small businesses that just do whatever you want and make all the decisions. So you really need to reevaluate your staff when you take it to the next level and you feel like you're falling behind.
that makes a lot of sense to me because both of our e-com stores that went to over $1 million a year in the first 12 months, we were a prime example of we grew so fast that when we ran into hard times, we didn't know what to do. The first
Mm-hmm.
time we grew, it was an Amazon store, and when it hit 1 million, this is when I started stepping into business. My wife really did that, so I give her all the credit for that one. But we had 6 employees, and our profit margins were just terrible. I was making more working in a job than she
Mm-hmm.
was running this business. So I come in, I'm a supply chain logistics manager, and I went, hey, I know a couple things about how to help you with some cash flow and help you with suppliers. And the first thing I did was just let go of a bunch of people. It's like you have way too many people. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found is even when I was home full time and then we built the second company, is when hard times hit, I didn't know how to retool them. Something that you were just saying right there. I didn't know. Like I brought them on to do specific roles where basically I just brought them in to do automation roles. And what happened if I would have known is I would just would have retooled them to help us do a little bit better activities, to have a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
systems in place. Exactly what you
Yeah.
were saying. So
Yeah.
when I sit there and I think about that, you when do you start hiring some of these people? Because what I've seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, please do, is I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed that people, especially early on, they hit that $30,000 a month, they'll get maybe to $50,000 a month. They start bringing on employees, and when they bring employees on, they're basically like a Swiss Army knife, so they can just kind of help with everything. But then as companies begin to scale, and then they get into those 8-figure marks, that's when they start needing more scalpels. They need people to be really precise and good at one thing. So how do
Mm-hmm.
you like when first question is when do you start hiring, and then two is how do you retool them to be more precise?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, an internal audit, whether it's official or not, it could just be one person, one executive thinking about the stuff that's going wrong with the company. Or I've had companies go in and just have meetings and like give me the top three things that are inefficient about this company, and then they aggregate
Mm.
their answers and whatnot. But understanding where your weak points are, whether it's personnel or operations or profit margins or whatever, you got to get that data in. And it's good to talk to sales. It's good to talk to marketing, all the different departments, from people who answer the phone all the way up to people who make leadership decisions. You have to get their input, because a lot of times executives like CEOs, founders, they're not in the weeds talking to customers, looking at survey results. Um, you can't fix something if you don't know what's broken. So you have to do an internal audit. You have to understand where the weak points are, and go from there.
That's really good. That when you're working with a founder and they're doing we'll just call it $50,000 a month, and you can tell that that everything is getting bottlenecked with them. How do you work with them? Because I know one of the things we talked about that I mentioned even in the intro was that you coach people as well. How do
Yeah,
you coach an executive to just get out of the way?
I know. It's hard. That's a really good question, because there's no getting out of the way. Every CEO is in the way at some point, whether it's in their own head or in their staff's head or bothering somebody or not bothering. It's there. People, like, let's say you have two employees. One of them wants to be managed and the other one doesn't, and then the manager only has one style. He's not going to customize the style for everybody. So when I'm talking to CEOs, the best thing that I do is I ask them, go through your whole week, keep a little notepad or some kind of Word document up, and anytime you see yourself doing something you shouldn't be doing, a lot of times people are in their way by micromanaging, like, oh, I'm checking analytics for the fifth time today, or I'm checking somebody's
Hmm.
email and making sure customer service responded. Every time you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing, I want you to write it down. And then we just look at the entries at the end. And it's really about having the CEO get comfortable on where their staff is at, giving them confidence, and then also having them refocus their day on what they want to do. Because a lot of times as companies grow, owners find themselves doing stuff, even other executives find themselves doing stuff that they don't want to be doing. They get sucked into all this other stuff that where people demand time of you. Really, leadership is all about reclaiming time and not have others demanding time of you. So I try to refocus their day so they are in command of their time and not being reactive, being proactive. So that's the biggest, I'd say, test is I would find out if somebody is commanding more time than they're able to give versus being proactive.
That makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense, and I like the way that you structure that. So,
Yeah.
Mike, as we come to a close, we're coming towards the end of the episode. There's a question that came to mind, and if you went back and watched any of the other episodes, I've never asked this question at the end. It's usually something about overcoming some kind of obstacle, but there's a better question that I have in mind now for you, which is, what is something that you wish I would have asked you on the show?
Oh man, that is a good question. um, Perhaps where I'd like to be in 10 years. A lot of times people like talking about being proactive and reactive. A lot of times people don't have that BHAG. In marketing, we call it a BHAG, a big, hairy,
Yep.
audacious goal. They set them for companies, but they don't set them for themselves. So it's always good for someone to think about what we're going to be in 5 years or 10 years from now.
So where do you want to be in 10 years from now?
Oh boy, I would like to be out in the field deploying technology that would help conservation, and knowing that my work as a marketer and an entrepreneur is pushing the lines of something I'm passionate about, which is in this case nature and animals. So I'd love to be able to marry better what I'm passionate about versus my life's purpose and my work.
Well, I love it. Mike, thank you so much for being here. Thank
Well,
you
thank
for everything that you're doing for businesses. Thank you for what you're doing for the conservation side. Thank you for everything you've done for our nation as well. I just want to thank you one last time for being on the show. And then also for everyone listening, thank you guys for tuning in. I know that you got something golden. Please let me know down in the comments below. And Mike, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Talk to you soon. Bye.
See you, everyone.